Hello friends, and welcome to the channel. I'm Handington, and today I've already made a video about NFTs and cryptocurrencies and all the other E's that are bad in the world, but not the Markiplier E meme. That's always good. Well, it's good compared to, cryptocurrency and NFTs. At least we can all agree on that. Well, no, some people won't, but those people don't. Their opinion doesn't matter. Anyway, so there's this really wonderful channel who's made really great videos, folding ideas, and goes super in-depth all about how this stuff works. It's a pretty long video. There's a lot to it. It's 2 hours. And sometimes it can get a little bit complicated if you don't understand exactly how that works. So please watch that video if you have either the time or if you're having it on in the background or any number of different things. But I watched it. Basically, the way it starts out, banks, they were the original NFTs, but banks are still better because they're not NFTs. Now, you see, what they originally did was they would collect whole bunches of houses, and they'd turn these houses into like these little lumps that they would end up selling to people, bonds and stuff based off these houses. So basically, instead of the little signature certificate saying, hey, here's a thing that you own, and it goes to something else, the way that they set stuff up, there would be some sort of proof, was in physical houses. And then a whole bunch of rich investors would invest, and they'd see another investor, and they'd be like, hey, you invested a whole heck of a lot in this, it must be important. So then they'd invest, and then more and more people would do that. But some people would end up being like, hey, there's a lot of people in this, I'm a regular person and not one of these soulless gigantic tycoons, I want to get into this action. And so basically banks are just like, hey man, you want this $1 million house? Well, all you have to do is just pay like $10 a month and you get it. These are not actual numbers. This is just for the silly analogy, just so you understand. So they'd be like, hey, you want this just $10 a month and you can just live in this house? And it's just like, oh, heck yeah. So people would get that, and this is predatory lending. And so after a while, the bubble burst and investors all realized, hey, the only reason why this is worth so much is because other people thought it was worth so much. So they all pulled their money out, and only a couple of, the real actual people who have human souls left, they would end up being stuck with this. And the banks were just like, hey, so you know that $1 million house? Well, now you have to pay $100,000 a week in order to pay it off. Oh, and by the way, now that it's no longer worth $1 million, even if you pay us off, it's now about the price of a ham sandwich, so enjoy. Oh, and by the way, we'll ruin your life if you can't pay it back, so bye. And that's what the 2008 housing crisis was. So after that, Bitcoin was made, and they sold the idea of Bitcoin as, hey, look at this thing. We're going to have money that's decentralized, so it's not going to be tied to those banks. So this way, these bad people can't just fluctuate the price. The government can't just decide to change the value of the money just to make life harder for people who have less of it. So they were like, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to sell it as this really great idea. So they sold it as that idea, but it wasn't that. It was all just a lie. It's not actually anything worth anything, and it's not actually, they just sold it off that idea, but it doesn't actually do that. And then other things came by, like Ethereum, which Ethereum is sort of like a service that is able to monitor a whole bunch of other cryptocurrencies, and it's also a base, but it's also a company that creates cryptocurrencies, and it's also a cryptocurrency itself. It's very confusing, and basically the way that crypto farming would kind of work is explained in the video. Don't worry about how it works, just don't buy into the stuff, don't invest in it, because it's all basically a scam. But basically, Ethereum came by, but a lot of places run off it instead because they made it a little bit easier for other people to plug into it. And basically, the way that the cryptocurrencies work is that they have machines that end up making a whole big log. Every time you buy something, it gets added to another, list. So imagine every time you make a list, every time somebody buys something, you write down a thing, then you copy it, and you print out another thing. So if you have a store, let's imagine you have a store, that every time somebody buys something, you have to print something out in this log, so you'll have one entry. This person bought this thing, and this person bought this thing. And it even includes, what do you call it, when people just make transactions, and even if people trade it and don't even necessarily sell something, basically every single time that happens, the log just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So these huge server farms to try and run everything. Like imagine just how much paper that would be if every single time somebody made a transaction, you just wrote down one other thing and made a brand new copy, so it's a brand new thing. You just have tons and tons of stacks of paper everywhere. Uh, so that's basically what kind of happens machine wise on these server farms. So basically, it's just like, oh, I made a new file. Let me save a copy of it. Let me buy a brand new computer so that this computer just has this file on it and this computer has another file on it. And it ends up being a huge waste of resources. That's essentially what the server farms are doing. But it makes it very secure in the sense that like they run a whole bunch of other things to be like, hey, you bought this thing and you have this transaction. The transaction list gets so long that people couldn't reasonably double check, but they have services that can check because they have to build entire services around just checking those logs because they're so huge. Those server farms, in order to keep all of those NFTs, every single time one of them appears, they have to use these server farms, and these server farms take up enough energy to basically run a country. I don't think people really understand just how bad all of these things are. And it isn't even, it's not like, so like we need to save that energy for stuff that like we have to use. So imagine all of these initiatives to like make green energy. It's like, oh, we got to conserve power. We got to save this. And then some jerk decides, I'm going to make a cryptocurrency. I'm going to draw enough power for like a city in this server farm to keep it running so I can say, hey, invest in this. Yep, thanks, bye. And then they abandon it. They leave the servers going and then they make off with all of your money. And then it just keeps drawing tons and tons of power. Because, like, at this point, in just this short period of time, it's almost reached enough power as keeping like all of other banks, all of just money as a concept running all over the world. We're at a point where like server farms are taking up almost that much. You could power entire countries with how much energy is wasted on making some already rich jerks even richer, or people who basically scam other people out of money. It is completely and entirely not worth it because like almost all of these just get taken down within a short period of time and then they make off with your money. And what's even scarier is that these communities that they build for crypto end up being basically cults. It's basically a cult. So you start off the day, you say good morning, and then you say good night to everybody. And they use these poor people and middle class people with their dreams of making money to try and be like, hey, here's a nice community. See, we love you. So you're in such a bad mental state where you need this tiny little community of saying good morning and good night to keep you functioning. Well, hey, if you don't keep buying lots of cryptocurrency, we're going to end up shaming you and shunning you from the whole world and stuff like that. So they keep you in there, and if every time somebody tries to get you out, they're like, oh, no, that's a lie. They just have fun being poor and stuff like that. So they end up cultivating this cult behavior to try and keep people in, and it's terrifying and terrible, and it's really bad. My outro. Have a pleasant day. Thumbs up. Have a pleasant day, everyone, and this is Handington signing off. That's my outro. Bye. Oh my gosh, I reverse waved. I need a nap. Bye.